Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 6:30 and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Comfort Lake Forest Lake regular board meeting for May 9th. And as I said, it's 6:30, so why don't we start the meeting and do a roll call for attendance, Tori, if you would, please.
Manager Lowe. Oh, he just entered the waiting room.
Okay,
I'm gonna wait for him to, I'll come back to him. Is
yeah,
that okay?
that's
Okay.
fine, perfect.
Manager Anderson.
Here.
Manager Baki.
Here.
Manager Taves. Come on, man.
Doug, I think you're muted.
Okay, President Schmaltz.
Here.
Manager Lowe.
Here.
Okay, so we have a quorum then this evening. I think Manager Taves is here, but we can check that later on.
Okay.
So the next order of business is to set the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or corrections or changes to the meeting agenda? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to accept the meeting agenda as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Tori, could you then do a roll call vote?
Manager Lowe.
Okay.
Manager Anderson.
Yeah, aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves. Oh, he raised his hand. He must not be able to talk. President Schmaltz.
Aye, so the motion carries. Moving on to new business, the first topic this evening is AIS Prevention and Management Comprehensive Plan. Mike, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. President, managers, just before
Mr.
we
Chair.
get started, if, oops, I gotta-
I'm sorry. This is council. Just a small note, Manager Taves has his hand up and I did not hear him vote, so it seems like he's here, but perhaps his hand was to vote in favor of the agenda approval.
Okay, so can we see that?
I can see his hand,
Okay.
yes.
So if he raises it for a vote, then let's count that as a vote. then.
Okay,
Okay, great. Thank you, the council. Appreciate that.
Can we see if we can figure out his,
Problem?
right,
I'll message him.
okay, thanks.
Thanks, Emily.
There we go.
All right.
Go ahead.
And, Mr. President, managers, just one other thing, so, we have, two, new technicians that have started with the district. And so I just thought before we get started, and I forget, wanted to do a quick introduction for, yes, they're attending remotely this evening, so Matthew Hendrickson and Jackie Buschjager. You may remember, Jackie's had some involvement with the district in the past. But I'll let the two of them do an introduction, and so maybe we'll start with Jackie and then to Matthew, so thank you.
Sure, yeah, I can just do a quick introduction to say hi. My name is Jackie Buschjager. I just was hired mid-April, so I've been a few weeks in the job now as a seasonal technician. And my background actually, as Mike mentioned, I've been in the Forest Lake community, but not in the watershed world. Precisely, I used to work for press publications at the Forest Lake Lowdown and would cover a lot of the events that the Watershed District would host. I actually got really interested in environmental conservation and went back to school for my graduate degree in environmental studies. So I went from being a journalist, now trying to kind of make a career switch into environmental resources. So I'm really excited to be here with the Watershed District.
Hi, Jackie. Welcome. I think you attended and covered some of our earlier events before you left. I think I remember you when we took that tour.
Yep, I did. I really enjoyed taking that watershed tour, and it's really fun
Yeah.
to be able to go back to some of those sites and actually do some work there.
Well, congratulations. It's nice to have you on board.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm Matthew Hendrickson. You guys hear me all?
Good.
All right. Yeah, originally I grew up actually in Forest Lake, but for like the past decade, I've been working in the cities in the culinary industry. And well, 2020 kind of came around and I kind of reevaluated everything and returned to school. Currently going for an environmental science major. And I guess this is my first week full time with the district and just finished up school last week. So last Thursday, actually. So yeah, really looking forward to working with everyone and getting to know our waterways more.
Great, it's great to have you on board. I had a chance to be with Matthew this morning because he and Aiden came out to my house and did a shoreline review. So it was very, very helpful. So I enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Okay, first on the agenda is the AIS Prevention and Management Comp Plan, and Aiden, or Garrett, excuse me, is here to present that. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, Mr. President and managers. Yes, I have the AIS Comprehensive Prevention and Management Plan on the agenda again tonight for consideration for approval. Brief background, kind of explanation, the purpose of the plan at the last regular board meeting, so I can keep it even briefer this time. So this was first sent out on April 12th, just for early review, given that it's kind of a longer report. Then I presented at the last regular board meeting, where I kind of explained how this came to be. So in the 10-year watershed management plan, there are goals and objectives identified for the AIS program. But that's kind of it. It's just telling you what to achieve and not really giving you all the tools necessary to achieve those things. So what we wanted to do with this report is to not only provide and kind of pave a path to achieve some of those, but also give some background information about how comprehensive the AIS program is for the district. Give some information on an introduction into AIS in general, if a member of the public wants to take a look at this. And then also from a transparency perspective, we wanted to provide other organizations or the public information about, how we're doing certain things or why we're choosing to manage certain things and so on and so forth. This has gone through, or is kind of the culmination of a lot of different research, a lot of different information gathering, underwent a thorough internal review of it. And then we also sent it out for professional review professional review by EOR and Blue Water Science. Both provide some good comments and feedback, which made it into the final draft here. And so this was, after that meeting, sent out again for another review prior to this meeting, where I was kind of looking for any final or additional comments, feedbacks, or concerns regarding the plan. I only received one response, and it was in regards to the rapid response section, kind of acknowledging that there is a good structure here in the AIS comp plan as is. It does identify some of the contacts and resources that those partners might be able to provide in during a rapid response, but wanting to go a bit further with it and really, so to speak, get your ducks in a row, making sure that you know exactly what equipment and resources those partners can bring to the table for any given AIS. So what I've done since receiving that comment is taken the structure that's in this plan and I've built upon it greatly, and I'm going to be setting up some meetings in the coming weeks with some of our closer local AIS partners to kind of workshop that and expand that framework. With that, I can stop talking and address any questions or concerns anyone might have about the plan.
I think Manager Anderson has some comments also, so maybe she can make some quick comments, and then I think we want to probably address some of the concerns and questions she has. So this would be another opportunity to add some additional information to the program, Garrett. So, and then I can ask the other managers if anybody else has any comments. Manager Anderson, do you want to share some of your points that you had identified?
Yeah, there's just 4, and I'm not sure that they're,
Garrett, you'll get a copy of this. We'll send it to you. So
they're not totally I don't know that you're totally relevant to what he's doing here, but, the history of the Chisago County Grant Program, isn't correctly represented. And I think it just needs a little bit more filling out, with a few more sentences, but that started, back in, the early, probably 2013, 14 period. And, before that even, it was probably 2012. Because, Mike wasn't here yet, we had a different administrator and the county, brought that proposal to us. And the amount was 75,000. You do have that in your report, which is good. But it's gone down to 35, and that's just because we've taken over more of the hiring of the actual inspectors. It started out with Chisago County providing that through the whole district, not just in Chisago County. This grant was for upgrading the AIS activity monitoring and response in Chisago County. But because our district, fairly new at that time, covered Washington, it expanded into the whole district. So I think it's important just to give some recognition to Chisago County for that start of that program. They're also not listed in the contributions list that you have right around that same area. I think it's pages 18 through 21. So if you could add them to that list, that would be good.
Mm.
The other comments, I really believe, are comments that either Mike and I can work out, or we can talk about it at some future point with the board. But looking through the history, the Comfort Lakes, both little and big comforts, have had almost no investment or very low investment in the AIS area. And what struck me is that those two are obviously part of the four that make up our major subwatersheds. And we've had minor lakes that have received more attention. And that's a fairness issue that I think we can work out at a future time, not necessarily for your report. The goals as presented are based on the last update of our management plan. And here again, we've had several discussions over the years about just focusing on phosphorus, and that other lakes, other than the several that have phosphorus, tremendous phosphorus impacts, other lakes have different types of impacts from AIS. And I believed that we had settled that issue when we went into this new 10-year plan, that we were going to look at those lakes individually, apart from a blanket statement that we're only going to do this, we're only going to look at phosphorus. And yet that goal is still there, and it's triggering some of the responses that I saw from you in that report. But again, not being certain that that has actually been conveyed as an outcome to you, I wasn't willing to just go ahead and, gut that section of your report. So again, I think those last two bullets of mine really just need further direction and further information on my part. So I'm gonna look into those, Garrett, and get back to you, but I'm not recommending any changes to your report right now.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Any other comments or suggestions from the rest of the board? Okay, hearing none then, I would entertain a motion to, the motion we have on board is to accept it. I think we should accept the report that's been submitted, but I think we need to amend that by including the updates that have been suggested by Manager Anderson and myself, and my suggestion was mainly to really beef up the rapid response side of the program, because that's the action, that's where the rubber hits the road, and we need to be prepared to really take command of the Army and move it out there as quickly as possible. So I'll amend that motion to that extent.
That sounds good. Can I just make a comment on what you just said?
Sure.
It was the fall of 2014 when we met as a board, and what was occurring in Forest Lake, in particular, zebra mussels, which nobody wants. they had migrated to Comfort Lake. And so that was found in the fall delineation that Blue Water Science did. So the board met and we talked about having a response program so that we didn't have to wait for a budget change, and we gave direction to the administrator to move quickly on those types of things. So we may not have had that as clearly written down as you have done in your manual basically for us. And so I think what you've done here is good, because you can't live on what people remember. And so it's good to have it written down in a structure format, and it's something obviously that I think has to adapt over time. And you mentioned that when you were talking about the history. So I think that's all good. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that this is a big deal. It's an important topic, but no reflection on your effort here.
Okay, so we have a motion as I amended it, and then we need a second for that motion.
I'll
I will
second.
second that
Oh.
motion.
Give it to me.
Okay, Manager Baki will accept your second, and then if Tori could do a roll call vote.
All right, Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so the motion carries. Thanks, Garrett. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it as well.
Next item is the Lower St. Croix WBIF grant work plan revision.
Mr. President, managers, again, can answer some questions if there's any, the board might have on this topic, or I don't know if Manager Anderson, if it was part of your last.
Yeah, I can certainly talk to it. Do you have a slide, Emily?
No, just
Prepared on
the,
this? No?
just the materials that were in the bill.
Okay. Well, basically, what this is wrapping up is that discussion that we've been having on how much money to keep back for the metro area and how much to forward onto the Lower St. Croix work as a partnership. And the ending result, I think it's in, but I made a copy of that, but there's if there's a memo that Emily did, I'm sure that has the details in it, but I believe it was $75,000 that was set aside for the only project that was provided to the Lower St. Croix Partnership Metro Convene meeting group, so that we could decide, we were expecting several, I think, but we only got one. And so that was withdrawn from the, almost 900,000, I think, dollars that was allocated to the Metro. So the rest of it is all being sent to the partnership. And that's what this motion is about, is to approve that proposed work plan revision and budget.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Manager Schmaltz,
Go ahead, Manager Baki.
as I look at the information we received in the board packet, it talks about an agronomy outreach specialist. So is that in addition to this as well?
Yeah, the agronomy outreach specialist is a position that has been held open, and we had a really good person, the first one. She left last year, at the end of last year, I believe. We're close to it. And so what this is about is having it be a local staff position instead of embedded with the University Outreach Extension Program, University of Minnesota Extension Service. That's what we started the first position as, but ran into problems with the university using our person for other things. And it just got to be, kind of an unwieldy situation. So this person, when hired, is going to be a local staff with the Washington County Conservation Service.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, if somebody would like to read the motion at the bottom, we can then vote on it.
I will move to approve the proposed LSC FY 23 WBIF work plan revision and budget amendment.
Thank you, Manager Baki. We have a second to that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Manager Anderson. Troy, could you please do a roll call vote?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so motion carries. Thank you. The next item is item C, the Lassard Sams OHF grant application.
Mr. President, managers, just a little bit of a clarity on that Lower St. Croix piece there. It had to do with, there's gonna be two, there's one discussion will be coming up in the 25 budget. This had to do with reallocation of some of the 23 budget.
Okay,
So, we'll see more information at a future time on the other one. On this particular one, district has been, pursuing this, additional grant. Well, with that property on the Bone Lake South, we were to look to submit an application for a phase 2. And well, right now, it's a little bit in flux. We had a meeting this afternoon with a party that is also expressing interest in the property. And the landowner is kind of waiting to see what comes of that. And it may change the area that we would potentially have access to. We would have to redo the appraisal. So I haven't had a chance to talk to staff about whether or not we would do this, because we have to submit it by the end of like the 25th or so of May. If we realistically will have enough information to go back to submit a request for the land management restoration side of it or not. But this was, we've been kind of putting this on hold to see if we were gonna get there with the owner. I guess at this point, I would still say, approve, the motion with the understanding that I'll continue to work with the board president to see if it's worth actually submitting anything, if there's any changes within the next, week or so. Because we would have to, I've been trying to do some preliminary work to get a grant proposal together. But I also am a little bit reluctant to send something to the legislative committee. And then say, well, sorry, we need to change the boundaries and everything else, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
When he's done.
are you finished, Mike?
so yeah, I think right now that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, Manager Anderson?
Well, you just voiced what I was thinking, when I went through this as well, is that we're putting the cart before the horse, I think here. We don't even have the land.
Mhm.
And so secured, and so for those reasons that you just stated, those are the same things that came into my mind. Is that we've already got the land money set aside, and we don't know if we're going to use that. The whole point of these things, these grants, is to get projects going in the ground as fast as possible. The assumption is always that that work has been done
Mhm.
and that you can get that grant and then go to town, I mean, so to speak. And start implementation right away. And I just don't want to get a reputation of getting this money, securing it away from other people that are ready to go and holding that project up when we're not even certain, like I said before, that we're even gonna have the land. So I would recommend that we don't do this.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Any other comments? Just to comment on Manager Anderson's comment, I think there might be some value in doing this because if we get the grant, then we can almost assure him that we are gonna restore the wetland and the prairie. which was a concern of his, right? He would like to see this thing restored and maintained in the future.
Well, yes, you know, so, and I guess my position at this point is that there's, we approve the motion with the caveat that unless something transpires with him saying, because we have the offer in front of the landowner. So if we get a call tomorrow based off of his conversation today with this other party, but he could say, okay, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm gonna just go with your offer. Then we could turn around the application and get it in the cycle. But if, to Manager Anderson's point, if we don't have the land secured by the deadline, we would not submit it.
Right, okay. That sounds like fair. The other question I had too was what, I think there's some flood value to this whole.
Yes.
Have we talked to him about the importance of that in our new 10-year plan, that this would be a major part? Is he aware of the value of that to the community? And that if it's turned into a housing project, we lose that benefit. The community loses that benefit.
Right, yes, we've
So
had,
he's aware of that then.
right,
Okay,
but there's multiple things potentially here, including this other party not wanting the wetland,
okay,
but then we have to go through another process with the DNR and the committee, you know,
gotcha.
so.
Okay,
There's a lot, it's not over yet, you know, by any means, we're still,
We're still in discussion stage.
right, we're still,
We're not implementation ready.
right.
right. Mhm.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we need to have a motion on this then?
So my recommendation, Mr. President, was to,
To vote for it.
right, but you can modify it. to say-
Okay, so I'll make the motion in here that we'll move to authorize the district administrator to submit an application to the Lassard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund grant program. And execute the grant agreement. If we are able to obtain the land before the deadline of May 25th of this. May 24th for this, is that correct, Mike? May 24th?
I believe, yes.
May 24th, awarded funds. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I,
Council, go ahead.
yes, I don't know if staff is working with real estate council at this point, but in your motion, you say if able to obtain the land by the deadline.
Right.
A question to Mr. Kinney, if he understands what that means, because we will, it's not as though we will have a closing by that date.
Maybe a signed agreement, Mr. Council,
Purchase agreement?
purchase agreement, yes.
Are you working with real estate council on this? Are they tuned in?
Yes, and they, right, and we have a draft with the owner.
So I'll amend my motion to follow the suggestions of recommendations of our council. That that we at least have a purchase agreement signed by the deadline, May 24th.
Can I ask one more question?
Manager Anderson.
If we're not using our assigned lawyer, then attorney for the district, who are we using?
That's at, Alex. Mr. Holman, Selkie, thank you, he's recommended by council.
Okay.
That's covered, Manager. Okay, so any other questions before we vote? If not, Tori, if you could do the roll call vote, please.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
No,
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries then. Thank you. Moving on to the delisting schedule. And this is an action step or another. This is a discussion item only.
Mr. President, managers, at the last regular meeting. There was a request to go through and have at least bring back some recommendation or some input as to what would be the potential for delisting. And, so I know both Emily and, Dr. Wilkinson were part of this discussion. And maybe Dr. Wilkinson would be most positioned to answer the questions about the, some of the data related to, why we would have a schedule as such. But overall, I think the memo was laid out fairly clearly. We do have some concerns about some of the lakes in terms of making sure that we have sufficient data as noted. And really, I guess at this point, we could just take some questions for further discussion. So I don't know if you want to just proceed with the board.
Yeah, so we have some suggestions here and procedures. Does anybody have any suggestions or comments? I think our goal is to move as quickly as we feel comfortable, right? With, somebody made the comment that this is a first wet year, so that could have some adverse implications on our past performance. So it'll be good to see how we weather that particular situation. Okay, yeah, Manager Anderson.
Well, I have some specific questions, obviously. This report that we got, unless I'm totally missing something here, I don't see the same type of information that we had within the monitoring report that EOR also did. So one of the things that struck me when I was I'm looking for those charts to see if they're copied here, but I was looking at the charts for all the lakes that our major lakes that we've been monitoring, and there includes a couple of the minor lakes, but Bone Lake, when you look at Bone Lake's chart and Comfort Lake's chart, Big Comfort Lake's chart, they're almost identical. And so I want to understand why there wouldn't be a move to delist Comfort Lake. It's been listed longer, as you can see, than any of the other lakes. So why was the engineering judgment not to move forward with that? I just need to understand that. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me right now.
Prior to the Bone Lake one? Or in partner or at the same time with Bone Lake?
Yes,
What?
at the same time, because their charts, their graphic charts over the last 20 years seems to be pretty identical. I think actually Comfort Lake has a few higher ratings in the three major areas than Bone Lake does. So there has to be a reason, and I'm just not able to see it.
Well, I think there was two things, and then Dr. Wilkinson, you can add into on this, but as I recall, one is that we did see a little bit of a spike in or change in water quality from the lower clarity levels after the full lake treatment. So there was some concern that maybe we didn't have the longevity as we had hoped. Last year, though, came back to the lower water or the better water quality, lower numbers. So the other was, would it have any potential impact on the viewers of other grant applications if we were saying, well, we're using the point that Little Comfort or Comfort are on the impaired list? Does it negatively impact our chances of a grant application if it's now delisted? So between the two, that was basically the summary of my recollection of the discussion that we had previously at the time when we were moving forward with Bone Lake. Because the Bone Lake one was consistently at that level, but also we had the Capstone project in Moody Lake. We really did not anticipate any more bigger projects around Bone Lake. I don't know if if Dr. Wilson, if you saw anything different, or if Emily, if you remember anything differently than that. But
Thanks, Mike. Mike, I think you did a good job summarizing the discussions as I am aware of them. And I also just want to reiterate from the report that Emily submitted that Comfort Lake is in, as of our opinion right now from the data, is in the best shape to be delisted. It's at the lowest risk of having any kind of bounce back from a wet year as opposed to some of our other lakes that are listed. And my understanding also is that what's good for Comfort is what's good for Little Comfort is good for Comfort. And so the strategy was also to include improvements in Comfort to be part of the package deal with Little Comfort's improvements, which are being planned.
Why can't they be considered separate basins like Forest Lake is?
Yes, they can be considered separate basins.
Okay.
That was purely from a strategy standpoint, not an engineering standpoint.
correct, Dr. Wilson. So that's been our longstanding. We would typically include in our applications the downstream water bodies, including the Sunrise and the St. Croix in terms of applications for grants.
Manager Anderson, any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, they were considered separate before, and somewhere in the last 5-year period, maybe even 4 years ago, it was very recently, when we got that diagnostic report, they were combined. So I'm not sure why that was done, if this is gonna create all these problems. You know, instead of letting the lakes, when they hit that mark, and we're comfortable with that mark, being delisted on their own.
Well, for the Highway 61 project, that was on the Sunrise, it had nothing to do, so we were, so talking to the Lower St. Croix, and one of the things that we could say was that that Comfort Lake and the Sunrise and the St. Croix were all still impaired water bodies. That was a true statement, had nothing to do with Little Comfort, but from a Highway 61 project's perspective, as we were communicating a message to the Lower St. Croix about the grant request that we had to them, that was an element, so,
Little Comfort was?
no,
Oh.
Comfort Lake.
Comfort Lake,
But
yeah,
still being on the impaired waters list, so. But now, I think by and large, you know, we include other things as well, to say, as you stated previously, you know, sediment and other components. But it, you know, it was still a reality, and it's, I guess it didn't hurt our application, and again, there was simply this element of a couple of years ago that we saw a little bit of a spike in the trend line. So we didn't know then if, you know, one more year back in 2023, we saw it return to where it had been in prior years. And so we feel confident again with where we're seeing that we're probably on a continued, that it was an anomaly. But still not enough to take us out of the state standard.
Okay, any other questions?
Manager Schmaltz,
Manager Bucky, go ahead.
point of clarification, when it comes to a lake being delisted, can any organization request it, or is that solely the role of the watershed district that the lake is in?
Well, Mr. President, Manager Baki, so clearly it can be other organizations because watershed districts do not comprise the entire state of Minnesota, or they don't exist elsewhere in the United States. So, well, not to the extent that they do in Minnesota. So other entities can proceed with that. We make it a lot easier for the state agency, the MPCA, to submit to the EPA. And basically, the package that Emily put together for the MPCA was what they refer to as the gold standard with respect to providing information to support the delisting designation, or so. So others can do that, and I do. Does that answer your question then, Manager Baki?
Yes, I guess that does answer my question. I guess my understanding was, and what you have explained before, Mr. Kinney, is that the work that was done around and near Bone Lake, kind of like you said, set a standard of what best practices should be in getting water quality. Isn't that the case?
Well, just to clarify, that procedure and practice was set by the district. And we started at the headwaters of the district, which is Bone Lake. And then that's when we found out that Moody was such an impact on Bone Lake. It was, what, 80% or 60%, something 60, I think. 60 to 70% of the pollution load coming in. So that process was the first implementation of the district's plan, strategic plan to tackle the waters. And, you know, just to comment on that, if watersheds exist, can other people request things of the MPCA? The whole point of starting a watershed district is to have an entity that has authority over the waters within its boundaries. And those boundaries are set by the state, by Bowser, so I think, to me, the language is pretty clear in that statute, is that the district becomes the authority on the water within those boundaries. So I think what Mike said, was that the MPCA that you had talked with, that they recommend that the watershed.
They're designated by the. So the state has to accept that they will take responsibility, otherwise the EPA would come in and do the
Yeah.
work, so
Okay,
they represent Minnesota.
okay.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, then Mike, go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, just want, if we could get some further clarification or direction, so we've provided this recommendation. Is there some proposed direction? Does the board want us to proceed then with submitting a similar package? Of course, this would be on Emily's plate probably, of a similar note to proceed with Comfort Lake, even though I think it's an every other year process, if I recall correctly. So there's no urgency in doing it, but
Well, I think we should move ahead as quickly as we can, assuming that we feel confident in the technical results of what we're submitting, you know, so we don't want to have something come back on us later on. But we have a number of years on most of these lakes now, correct?
right, and as Manager Anderson noted, Comfort Lake has been trending below
Yeah.
the state standard probably as long as Bone Lake. So it's ready, but at this point, we could probably take in the 2024 data and then work through the fall and winter and submit another package by next spring, and then it would be the following. It would be 2 years when the next official delisting would occur, but I think the PCA could start processing it just about any time.
Yeah, I think that's fine, because we're gonna have a wet year, so this will be a good test in terms of how the alum treatment holds up in Forest Lake, and plus what happens in Comfort Lake also, so.
I'm gonna make this statement, and I don't have an issue with waiting until Little Comfort is addressed. But there isn't any activity in the budget for Little Comfort, really, you know, for the next couple of years. And that's what concerns me, is that we're going to have this lake that's still carried under the delisting or the impaired waters designation when it isn't. And so either we hurry up now and start really catching up on the Little Comfort piece. I know we've had a property issue there too, where we thought we had a property and we didn't. So we need to tighten up how we do that, I think, so that when we have good discussions, we can secure that with a legal document of some kind, and then not have our projects derail. Because we're off track.
Mike?
I'm not sure, well, the only additional information I can provide on that particular topic is that just earlier today, the landowner has communicated that they would like to proceed. So,
The
there's
first one?
the one for Little Comfort, we want to do the project, right? So,
This is the second.
correct, the
Yeah,
second,
okay,
yeah. So we're
gravel pit people are gone, right?
correct,
Okay.
right? So we'll start working, we've been getting everything together. We've been working a timeline, getting ready for and coordinating with the UR, like once we get the piece, now there's some next steps, but we've given them in the same way. We've been working with Alex Selke, had a draft purchase agreement and all the materials ready for them to review. They've had it reviewed by a professional on their side, and he came back just earlier today and said, it looks good, we're ready to proceed. So from that standpoint, we're looking to proceed with the engineering component of getting an application ready for the next cycle for the Clean Water Fund.
Great, good news. All right, any other comments? So yes, we're supporting you to move ahead as you had suggested, and even faster if we possibly can. Okay, moving on then to the budget presentation, item E. Suspect Emily will be leading this.
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay.
Okay,
Hey,
Mr. President. Yeah,
Hello, Emily.
Mr. President, managers, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we, kind of similar to our regular process, at the last meeting, the board approved the budget schedule, direct staff to prepare a proposed budget for the year 2025. I've got some presentation slides to present here, to sort of present the budget to you. And then hopefully at this point at the end, we will have some time for discussion and questions. And then we can talk about the next steps and what kind of information the board wants to see brought forward to a June workshop. So the next time we discuss the budget. So you had in the board packet, and we had printed out copies at the office of the budget packet. I'm going to just go through with these slides, kind of these a recap, high-level summary of these different pages. These first 6, kind of focusing on those at high level. And then we can get into that additional detail if we want, or if there's questions. And then we decided, since we're at this sort of pivotal moment with our projects, we provided a separate supplemental attachment in the packet, just kind of explaining the history of projects for a few of our lakes there, and some upcoming ones as well, such as that Heath Avenue iron enhanced sand filter that Mike just referred to. So our proposed budget here, just looking at that expense revenue summary, we've got expenses of 2.6 million, or excuse me, right here. Expenses of 2.6 million, and then evenly balanced with the revenues. Those expenses are more or less in line with the watershed management plan, but with a few differences, such as the alum treatment is on, the Forest Lake alum treatment is on a slightly different timeline, but it's consistent with, what the data is telling us. And then the expenses are a little bit different with pending grant applications. So some of those project expenses, we're recommending kind of a TBD there, and then we'll add in the expense and the grant revenues once those grants are awarded. And so both on the expense and the revenue side, doing that, recommending that the board do that budget amendment if and when we secure those grants. But the grants that we show here, that 378,000, are grants that are already awarded, or a few kind of smaller ones that are just regular recurring each year that we can generally count on. Another thing is interest. It has been a big one for the district. Last year, the board made a few changes to kind of how the district does its banking, and so we've increased our interest earnings in our projections. But those will, of course, always be a function of, how much cash the district has in the bank. And then other revenues such as permitting and partnerships factor into that as well. And then we have the loan section here. So the board had been kind of projecting, so the 2024 budget had 800,000 in loan revenues. And so we just recently received 750,000 under kind of that third installment of the loan, what we're calling Loan C. And so in this projection, we could actually amend Loan C, get another 500,000 under that loan. And maybe if there's time, it's really dependent on the Pollution Control Agency and that program availability. But right now, tentatively expecting, if we get it toward the end of the year, we could disperse 50,000 in 2024, and then the remaining 450,000 in 2025. But that split again will be dependent on how that timing works out with the Pollution Control Agency. And then finally, that kind of largest portion there is the district's levy. Under this scenario right now, we're keeping the levy flat. And so of course the board will decide how they want to handle that. But I'll share some projections and you can discuss if you wanted to keep it flat in 2025 and then look ahead, how might it look in 2026 and beyond if and when the district stops receiving that loan revenue that we've been getting the last few years. Here's that expense revenue recap. So kind of just looking at how that fund balance shifts from year to year. So we just finalized the 2023 audit, deficit of about 30,000. And so that ending fund balance of just over $1 million there carries over into 2024. There's still some unknowns with the 2024 estimated year end. Just like Mike was saying, some things are in flux with that Bone Lake South property acquisition. There's also that Heath Avenue Iron Enhanced Sand Filter property acquisition on the radar too. So depending on how those shake out, we're really hopeful that we'll be able to do that. These might shift a little bit, but the data that we have right now, we were projecting being under budget by 179. I think just with that Heath Avenue acquisition alone, this will be a little bit closer to zero. We'll be taking out some expenses there. But just current projection ending the year at 1.2 million in the fund balance. And these are already taken out of these numbers for the audit. But here, when we're kind of doing our math in the spreadsheet ourselves, I've got some levy and loan projections to show later. And so that's this 25 and 75 if the district wants to keep putting a portion of its levy into sort of a savings account for future loan repayments. And I'll get to that next. But if you have a balanced 2025 budget, ending at the end of 2025 at 1.1 million year-end reserve, which is generally a pretty good place to end at. So the next page would be the budget overview. And so just keeping it really high level of what's in this budget and what is not in the budget. You've got administration, which is kind of our general ongoing overhead sort of things, the office rent, board administration, dues, things like that. Under our debt services fund, we have loan repayment now on loan A and loan B. So loan A, we've been doing the past couple of years, that's 150,000 a year, plus loan B. Now we've added on another 175,000 to our loan repayments. And so that will be 325 this year and next. Our ongoing programs, which we've been trying to, these program updates and a lot of, reports and things coming forward, trying to just keep the board informed of the many activities that we have going on in our programs. And there's really a lot to unpack there, which, depending on questions, we can get into more details later as well. In the projects category, we have a few ongoing project efforts and awarded grants. One recently awarded grant was the fiscal year 2024 Clean Water Fund Competitive Grant. We received $90,000 in grant funds for the July Avenue feedlot restoration. That's located just upstream of School Lake in the Little Comfort Lake District. And so we've got some projected grant expenditures there, and a few other projects going on as well. And then some, some local funds allocated as match for new projects and potential grants. We are going to be trying to apply to as many grants as possible. And it's possible, we'll aim to when we can fund 100% of project expenses using overlapping grants. But it's good to allocate some local dollars to just to do that pre-project feasibility in some cases, or to provide that match if needed. 3 things I wanted to highlight that are not in this budget, but we have on our radar. So the new office space, that's going to be a big expenditure. I know that the board and Administrator Kenny have been working on some visioning there. There's a lot of different directions you can go and a lot of potential revenues out there from USDA grants and loans or bonding or private foundations. A lot of things possible, but with varying feasibility. So that will have to, once the board kind of decides the direction on that, and some funding is confirmed, do that amendment. And as we kind of alluded to earlier, we've got 2 major land acquisitions on the radar right now. And so we're getting closer to kind of confirming, getting a signed purchase agreement, just so we have that high degree of certainty there. And then adding those expenses, and if there's grant revenues, adding those back in once that's signed.
Emily,
And
can
then,
I just-
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, excuse, I hate to jump in here, but I think that's a good point. We don't have much budgeted for land, which then implies that if we go and purchase land with an opportunity, that comes out of the reserve. Is that correct, Mike? Well, how do we pay for that land? With a grant and reserve?
Right, the previous direction was out of, the bulk of it is typically has been a grant.
Right.
And then, whatever match there might be, which is, I think about 10% or something. And there's more recent scenarios would come out of reserve funds.
Emily, it would be good, I think, for the board to be able to see that, what you just said. You said we got 2 grants we're hoping to get this year, 2 properties we want to buy. If you could put a footnote maybe on somewhere in there under the land acquisition area at the bottom saying, we've got these 2 properties and we expect, X thousand dollars for grant and then 10% expenses, which would come out of reserve. Because my question was, do we have enough reserve to cover something we want to buy? And if it's only 10%, we probably do. But it's good to know those numbers and know what we're hoping is going to come through for us.
Well, I think the other, Mr. President, component here is that both of these properties are in play for this year for 2024 may not impact the 2025.
budget.
Right.
But it's a concept I'm just ready to.
Correct, yes. And then, so the other is that, as we get into the Greenway corridor activities, this will be more, an activity that we will pursue on a more regular basis. And we will definitely want to be, trying to maximize the utility of the Outdoor Heritage Fund.
Yeah, I mean, all pending grant land acquisitions, though, whenever they fall, is still gonna affect the reserve. So it's good to know whatever we have on the hopper that we feel confident about. And I think we have 2 right now. And if we had another one later on, we just add it to the list, so, but, okay.
Right, and there's always some amount of work that has to be done beforehand, so that's.
Okay.
Or and we've talked about this in the past, is that we have a 400, 500,000, whatever, for the earnest money, whatever we need to act on it right away before we get the grant, and that's reimbursable through the grant. So one of the things, and I'm glad you brought this up here too, because part of that discussion, I've never liked this buried in the programs area. About a year ago, I recommended that we create a separate 6,000 category. So it'd be a new 6-000, and then land acquisitions would then have their separate line items underneath so that we could track it. But we also remove it from that program area, which has things that go on all the time, year after year after year. So we get a much better idea of what that program's doing, that area is doing compared to these one-off $1 million projects. it just skews the data. So when you're trying to look historically at a high level, you've got these big aberrations that don't make sense unless you've been here. So I would still recommend that we do that.
Any managers have any comments, or Emily, you want to comment to that fact? It's adding another major line, but it takes the variation out of the program area, which is there's a very good point to that. So when we hit an acquisition, it throws a lot of money into that category.
Sure, I think the board can do whatever it wants with the budget. It would just be a matter, it wouldn't match the watershed management plan. And so it would be a question if the board wishes for the budget to match the watershed management plan, would you like to do a plan amendment?
I think that would be considered a minor one, but maybe Chuck can address that. I think the better thing for us is to worry about this first, what makes sense from our financial analysis standpoint. And then we do whatever we have to do
To clean things
to
up.
clean things up, yes. But I'm gonna make that a motion that we create a new category for land acquisition in the 6,000 chart of accounts category.
Okay, so if we second and pass that, then we'll have to go through the process of understanding what that implies in terms of extra work to change the 10-year plan. Is that correct, Mike?
Well, that would probably be something we'd have to maybe discuss with council, but the other suggestion I might have is that, at the last meeting, we were talking about these, working with somebody from a strategic planning standpoint, beyond just things like this. Are there other things that the district looking forward may want to modify? And then, do it all encompassing. So, we have no difficulty with that. I have suggested to Bowser that we create, at least collaborate with a number of other watershed districts to create. Everybody likes the framework of the 1,000, 3,000, this concept of structure that we have. We've now taken the 2,000, put it for debt. Would we want to do 4,000 for maybe ditch authority, 6,000 for land acquisition, things like that, that's all.
Yeah, I think we've done pretty well by just addressing issues as they've come up, rather than trying to forecast what we might need 10 years out. I mean, it's pretty easy to make a change on the budget thing. We've gone from a
Yeah.
pretty simple budget with, a lot of numbers in it, but to something that's pretty well structured now, and it's been done by improving where we've had a question like Manager Anderson brought up, addressing it, figure out the best way to solve it. So,
It's not a big deal,
No, it's
honestly,
not a
to
big deal,
change
no.
your chart of accounts. And
Yeah.
the chart of
Okay.
account concept came in, which surprised me with when we started this watershed district. Because it just didn't occur to me that people weren't using these approved accounting structures. And that's all it is. It's a way to aggregate your data into a meaningful way so that you can easily access the information. And create reports at a high level so that we don't have to go through all this detail all the time. What we can do is manage from a board standpoint, on an aggregated, cohesive level. And this isn't a big deal. I've talked to our CPA this is a year and a half ago, and also our day-to-day accountant, Nancy first, and then now the new one, and it's not a big deal. It's what we want to do.
is there a second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Manager Baki. A discussion on the motion, I guess I just want to clarify, so now we've got the motion. If we pass it, then we need to spend some time evaluating what it takes to do that, and if it's a lot of time or something, then the board you'll come back to us, or?
No, we don't have to, Mr. President.
Okay.
We can make the change to the budget and, come back to that topic at a later time.
We can add it to our chart of accounts too. So that when we do get activity, we have no activity in it now, so it's a perfect time to create it. And there's nothing to transfer over
Right.
for that. So then when the activity does occur, it gets coded to the right account. Just like any other expense.
Mr. Chair,
Council, go ahead.
With regard to the watershed management plan, if it's just a matter of adjusting the structure of the plan and the numbering there to match this, as Manager Anderson said, it's a minor amendment and doesn't even need public process. So
Do we
it
have to-
can be done easily.
Do we have to reprint the plan?
Well, you would. Well, that's a question for you. Presumably you'd want it to appear, to reflect the change. It would be an electronic change principally. You don't need to print hard copy to distribute to others.
I don't think we want to do that. But I think, we could, the copies we have, well, you have any thoughts on that, Manager?
Again, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think we're talking about it longer than it will take. I mean,
Yeah.
in percentages over time.
Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. You
Because
decide to do it or not
even,
do it.
it becomes an addendum, if you will.
Right.
So here's the updated chart of accounts so that
Okay,
they have the updated information and it's to the agencies and our local partners.
any other comments or questions? Okay, let's, Mike, you look like you have a question.
Yes, Mr. President, we're talking about for the 2025 budget, right? We're not planning to do anything immediately with the 2024 budget.
Are you going to have activity in 2024
We currently have activity.
for buying lots or acquiring property? Yes?
We currently have
Then we
activity.
create it now.
It means taking line 3012 and moving it up to be 6,000 header. Is that correct, Emily?
Yes.
Okay. So that shouldn't be too bad, even as we went this year, you have to just amend the sheet. Okay,
Okay, well,
and then you'd have to adjust the history then also, Emily, on the previous 3 years. So we don't get confused with that, because we had activity before. Okay, so then, thanks, Mike, for clarifying that. Let's go ahead then and do a roll call vote, Tori.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so the motion carries. And then to clarify, then we'll try to port that into this year's budget then format. I'm sorry, Emily, I got you off track, but go ahead. I thought we'd try to deal with that as it came up because it is it can be a big item, but when it is, if we got stuff hanging over us, we should know how that might affect the reserve and that kind of stuff, so.
Yep.
Go ahead, continue. I think you're making good progress here.
Okay, sounds good. The next packet or the next page in your budget packet should be loan projections. So I've got a couple slides here just kind of detailing out the district's loan history. I talked about how they're in the phases. Loan A and Loan B were both under kind of the earlier iteration of the program that was 0 interest in a 10-year repayment schedule. Loan C, in 2024, they changed the program and it's 1.5 interest, which is still pretty low, which is good. And a 7-year repayment schedule. They made these changes because the program, they needed to get funding back into it more quickly and to reimburse themselves for all the administration of the program. And so just things that we need to factor into our projections, factoring in what the interest will be, and then that repayment schedule. So these are just estimates. Interest will change depending on kind of the timing of how quickly the district disperses those funds, and then closes out that disbursement period. These are ballpark estimates, but you see that repayment, it'll be $325 this year and next year. And then assuming that we disperse final phase of the loan between 2024 and 2025, start repayment in 2026, we're looking at $500,000 or more in loan repayments. But the good news is the district has set aside some money for that. So, in 2022 and 23, the district set aside an extra 200,000 of its levy to start to kind of build this savings account for future loan repayments. And so we can decide if we want to, and so in 2024, budget that the board approved last year, another 350,000 dedicated to the debt services. 325 of that will go immediately to doing that repayment, and so 25,000 kind of goes into the savings account. The proposed budget we have here, and the board can tweak this if they want, but just kind of stepping up that service levy a little bit here. But you'll see we're gonna probably want to increase it, but we don't have to increase it quite as much as we would have to had we not done the savings account. So under this scenario, 25 budget would have 400,000 of that levy set to debt services. 325 would go paid immediately, 75 would go into the savings. And then the board can kind of look at future scenarios, how fast you kind of want to draw down that savings. So as these numbers get higher, or these numbers get higher, you wouldn't draw down quite as fast. So the board can think about that. This next slide is.
I think you and I should work on this, Emily, because the amount that we put into the fund every year should cover the payments, you know, moving forward. So let's just work together on that math so that we get that number right.
Okay. So this next slide, it's kind of a lot to take in, but just before we looked at the 10-year projection, just kind of wanted to recap the last 20 years of the district and sort of where we've come from and as we think about where we're going. So for a long time, the district, kind of starting at the bottom here, has talked about how it was in this planning period for the early years, had, you know, you could see relatively low expenses and the levy was pretty low at that time. The district made a pretty big step increase in 2009 and then kept it pretty flat for many years there. And you can see it helped build up that reserve fund balance. And so that fund balance reached its peak in 2014. And so that really helped us to get through this water quality implementation period. And we're talking about all these delistings and achieving these goals. And I think that's, you know, due to this strategy that, you know, the district had and using this targeted approach to achieving water quality improvements. And so we're kind of getting closer to this pivotal period of when we've achieved those water quality goals, what do we do next? And so that's kind of looking at, definitely you need to maintain those projects. That's going to be a high priority. You need to repay those loans. And then kind of looking at future project opportunities and priorities, as well as what kind of programs the district wants to provide in the future. And so what I have here, so you can see the expenditures over time have generally gone up. Here I have this dotted line. These are kind of those land acquisitions and other pending grant applications that we have. These points for 2024 and 2025 could end up being quite a bit higher, depending on those land acquisitions. You can see that the district levy has increased a little bit over time, but keeping in mind that you know, the board has always adjusted that levy with the tax impacts in mind. The taxable market value has been going up over time, but we know that we have kind of one of the higher tax impacts compared to other watershed districts, so we want to be cognizant of that. And just pointing out that differential between the levy and the expenditures is made up for by, you know, the grants, the loan, other revenues. Those really allow us to have these higher expenditures despite not having the levy be equal to the expenditures. And so that fund balance kind of took a dip in recent years, but it's still kind of holding steady at this level. And if we really commit to having that balanced budget, we can keep that safe fund balance to get the district through that first 6 months of the year. And that's kind of where that rule of thumb comes. Better say, generally 1/3 of your expense budget, you should have your fund balance at, just to get you through those first 6 months. There's a lot of other factors that go into that, but it's a very general rule of thumb. So when we look into that, call it an O&M period or a floodplain period or whatever it may be, there's a lot of different things that the district can do. I proposed looking at it, and I had formatted that 10-year projection slide. We'd keep the same sort of watershed management plan, chart of accounts and everything as the board just discussed, amended as just discussed. But I just put them in these different terms to help visualize kind of how far our levy will get us. So kind of just asking what sort of expenses over the next 10 years are core and critical. And that nice workload analysis report from 2020 has an appendix, which really details out, in statute for watershed districts, the things that are core and critical. And so for us, it's not in statute, but obviously you have to repay your debts. And so that loan repayment is going to be a high priority expense over the next 10 years. We would hope that, the district would want to maintain having its staff. That workload analysis called for 11.5 full-time equivalents. And so we're getting pretty close to that this year. So the projections kind of keeping at that level. There's some admin and overhead, just kind of unavoidable sort of things, like you need some degree of office space, board administration. There's some professional services in there, accounting, some bit of engineering and legal as well. One of the core critical programs identified there is that permitting program. So I bet your staff can carry out, and that's covered up here. We'll try not to duplicate that in the expenses. But having some local expenses for the permitting program, some of it is covered by those permit fees, but some things such as pre-permit review and kind of general program management, or the engineering and legal for government permits. Government entities are exempt from our fees, so the district covers those expenses for permits. And then, as I mentioned earlier, project operations and maintenance. Obviously, we want to protect those investments that the district has made, and it is also required by statute to do that as well. And so most years it's a relatively low cost, but we've projected out there's a few kind of bigger things out there in the future, such as those iron enhanced sand filters. At some point, we want to do that monitoring, but at some point, theoretically, they reach their effective life. It's estimated about 10 years, and that iron enhanced sand filter media needs to be replaced. So that's a big expense to consider in the future. But then, aside from those core critical things that we want to make sure that our levy and local dollars can cover, above and beyond that, we want to, per the board's direction, aggressively seek grants to do additional projects, try to cover 100% of those project program expenditures where we can, or if the board, builds up that reserve again and wants to use reserves to do more things, they can as well. Those were some of a way of looking at projected expenses that we're recommending, and a way of looking at the revenues. Obviously, the levy is a stable source of funding for the district. Just for the purposes of this scenario, we had put a 3% increase each year from 2026 and beyond. Obviously, the board will budget every year and decide that, and we can change this projection if you want, but just for planning purposes, thought that incremental increase would make sense to keep pace with inflation of expenses. Again, having that interest revenue there, and obviously that'll fluctuate depending on actually what's in the bank. But the district's trying to maximize that as much as possible, and that can be 50,000 or more in revenues, which is significant. Other revenues such as the permit fees and partners, the permit fees depend on the permits themselves, so that's subject to some fluctuation. But we've got some general ballpark estimates in there. We know that these are things that occur, and so want to have just an estimate. And then as far as earned grant revenue, like I said, be aggressively pursuing those. And if the board wants to put in some estimates or some goals for those grant revenues, they can, but just keeping in mind that they're subject to a lot of different variables, competitiveness in the program, or availability within those programs, et cetera. And so that's kind of how we had suggested looking at that 10-year approach. That one's kind of a lot to take in. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the earned grant revenue. That's another one where, so we divided it into these categories based on the certainty of the grant. So that top one, this is just the roll up at the top of the page itself, shows the awarded grants that have been awarded, and it's just a matter of making the expenditures and then earning that revenue. Or like I said earlier, high probability ones that are kind of recurring year after year. I separated out the grants that we have won for the Bone Lake South acquisition. Both those there's two grants, they're both for Bone Lake South. We don't actually have a grant right now for the Heath Avenue Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, but that's a much smaller property. And so we'll be circling back to the board with that once we get that signed with the landowner. Several grants that we have in progress, or I think at this point, all of them are under review by those agencies, and those are on different timelines. We'll know a lot by July. July's the time frame where several of those grants make their decisions. But those are pending currently. And then had a list of potential grants that are kind of tied to known priorities that we have. So if there's a TBD in the expense budget for a grant, it ties out to one of these grant programs here. And this is not an exhaustive list. We have a grant tracker internally that we are keeping up to date and updating with grants as they're received or potential projects that would meet that eligibility criteria. I've also been receiving Bar Engineering does a list, and so a fellow, the Bassett Creek Watershed Management Commission administrator has shared that with me as well. So that's just looking at other sources of grant information and cross-referencing. There's a lot out there, but the devil's kind of in the details with those grants and making sure that you have all those eligibility requirements and the timing is right and all that, but we're definitely evaluating all of this, and we've got a lot in the works. That was my presentation. I've got one more slide on kind of next steps and scheduling the next workshops and everything, but I thought we'd just maybe before get to that, have a space for questions, comments, and discussion.
So very good presentation, Emily. I think you covered everything pretty well. I'm sure all of us have maybe some questions, and I suspect if we do and we don't cover them tonight, it might be well to send them back to Emily or send them to Mike with a copy to Emily. So we capture what your concerns or questions might be. But since we've got time right now, does anybody have any questions or obvious concerns that they're worried about right now?
Manager Schmaltz.
Manager Bakke, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at the budget on page 17, which is the general office expenses. I know that wasn't included on our agenda, but I do have some questions regarding the line item 4265, which is conferences, workshops, staff training, and education. I noticed that in the past, we've budgeted $11,000, which is $1,000 per employee. And in 2023, about $6,000 of that was spent. So I'm wondering I'm a believer in professional development, continuing education. Do we ask our employees to submit an education plan for the year to have them spend that money in their education? And is that enough? Do we need to increase that amount?
Did you say page 17?
Yeah, as I'm looking on my computer, it's page 17. It's the general office expenses, 4265.
1,002, it's a general.
I'm finding page 17 on mine, so budget.
Mr. President, managers, I can start. Yes, so, toward the end of the year, each, staff member, is to provide, at least some framework of the training, and conferences and things that they would want to attend. So general rule of thumb is that they would have available 40 hours of time and up to $1,000 of expenses. Expenses that or training that's available in the Twin Cities or online often has little to no charge. There's no hotel expense or things like that. So it's very possible for some staff to get the training that they're seeking, either through some subsidized training program through the university or an agency or something like that, or something that's just is generally put on as professional development. By and large, we don't have much out-of-state training or things like that. So going up to Alexandria is probably the one annual thing that the managers and some staff attend, where there's some overnight hotel accommodations. The summer tour this year will be in the Twin Cities, so that will be local for whatever conference expense there is. It'll be the registration for that particular event. So by and large, but yes, to your fundamental question, we do have that framework, and staff are to provide input as to what they want, and they get it scheduled, and then they're responsible for submitting the request. And then I don't think there's ever been a case where something wasn't approved. We are looking at some changes potentially into the employee handbook. This is not necessarily to your question, but for other additional training or schooling. I've approved some such requests from some past, from other employees in the past for some training, or coursework that's applicable to their job. And then that would be incorporated into that, depending on the cost, or maybe it's spread out over a couple of years or things like that. So by and large, yes, we do have a training program framework.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And that was my next question. Is the $1,000 per employee enough to encourage them to perhaps, and could the money be used for tuition if they wanted to continue their education in pursuing a degree? And, if so, I guess the board would need to discuss how much should each employee be eligible for? And I guess that's a question for Chuck too, is can we legally do that?
Mr. Chair, Manager Baki, yes, you can legally do that. You as the managers will just need to be satisfied that the program is well structured so that it is designed to bring benefit to the district.
Okay, any other questions? I had one, Emily, as it relates to the drop that we have, like this year, we forecasted 1,719,000 in the levy. And we're estimated to get only 1,633,000, which is a 5% drop. That's a little larger than we've normally seen in the past, but if that's the kind of situation we're gonna face, a 3% increase, we may want to start considering, I'd like you to look at this, what how much have we lost each year in the past 4 or 5 years, and as a trend up? We may have to actually raise it to get back to where we were the year before, and then take a 3% on that. If you follow what I'm saying, so.
Yeah, the delinquent taxes. You know, we levy for 1.7, but we get 1.69 because some people don't pay their taxes.
Right,
So you're saying
right.
bump it up so that we theoretically get the original number we want, even with delinquent taxes.
Right. Something to think about, what that's your 10-year target or something. Anyway, I just think we should take out what that history has been and decide when we start, whether we increase the levy or not, to pay attention to that. Yeah, for example, in this case, in 2026, you're only forecasting 1,771, which is below what we were supposed to get in 2024. And that's because we took that 5% hit and we're increasing on the lower number. So what I'm saying we need to think about is actually increasing on the number we were supposed to get, and then we can avoid that. And if people ask why we have a higher increase, we can say, well, because we didn't get all the money you promised us. Citizens didn't pay. So that's gonna add up over a 10-year period. It's gonna cost us a lot of money. So I think let's put that in the back of our heads as we start talking about levies. We need to make sure we pay attention to that. Okay. Any other thoughts from anybody else? Another one I had was that obviously our projects dropped dramatically this year, and actually EOR is down like 30 or 40% in terms of man hours for the watershed. And half of that is in programs and half of it is in projects. So I guess one of the questions I had is that we're moving into a new project area, which is the creating flood protection, which means completing construction projects that capture acres, feet of water. Is that correct, Mike? So what I'm asking for is that we should, what does an average project like that cost? If say it's a medium-sized project of 50 acre feet for the year, what would a project like that cost, or something that you would expect on that? And then also, when do we expect those project costs to start? Is our best estimate? Because that's our next big increase in capital investments we're gonna have to make. And we should see how soon that's gonna come, because we really haven't increased much dollars in the floodplain zone or in the resiliency program from last year. So we're not forecasting to do a lot of work in that area. And so I just want to get a better handle on how fast that's going to move forward. Because, you know, we're not going to have much EOR time if we don't have projects to work on, which is
Well,
okay, but we want to get something done in the flood.
they should still be reviewing
Right,
even projects that
right.
staff does.
So that would be something I think we should take a look at, and you know, not next meeting, but I think if you guys should, I mean, I just saw in the summer program, which is what, 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now? Somebody's making a presentation on the cost and the project of creating 150 acre flood program. So they must have some costs in there, et cetera. You can just look at what they spent per acre foot. So we have some kind of an idea.
You talked about that summer tour coming?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just came in the mail today.
That was one of the, in fact, that's the only project I was interested in.
Yeah,
The speakers that was
And
there,
it's
everything else I could care less
Minnesota
about.
Watersheds is sponsoring it, so I want to register for that. Obviously, Steve does.
That's
No,
the only one I want to go to, so I'm not gonna waste the whole 2 days for.
With you, we will be bringing it up at the next meeting.
Oh, you will, okay.
Yeah.
It's only one day and a cocktail dinner at the night.
And the other question I had, since we got a couple more times, then I'll quit. I'll send the rest of them in, but our operations management got off to a really good start this year. We really put the program together on that. And this year, I'm noticing that the budget's dropped 62%. And that our manpower has gone from 49,000 down to 8,000. So I'm wondering, did we get so good at this that we can cut our man hours back that much? If you go to the detailed project chart.
We're gonna have the opportunity to go through this detail before.
Yeah, right.
I'm not prepared to get to.
That's
that point.
fine. I had a chance to look at this and some
There-
numbers popped out at me.
There are
So,
some things that really popped out to me. And the decreases in a lot of areas concern me. But if they're tied to uncertainty about grants or uncertainty about something else, it would be really nice to have a uncertainty sheet. So that you can list for us what projects are in this limbo area. And the ones that you're gonna be pursuing, you know, via grants or any other source of funding, so that we can look at that while we're budgeting. And approve that list,
right.
or change it, or do whatever. And then the last, or the other thing that I wanted to ask you to do, Emily, is to bring up the very last chart that we always get in the fall, which is the separation of the levy impact by county. Because the impact is higher in Chisago County, there's no commercial base. The housing market is not as big in the upper range of housing, and so, you know, it has a much bigger percentage impact. So I would like to review that chart again, if you can send that out to everybody.
Based off of last year's, we won't get the next one until like.
No, I understand that, but we're gonna have, even if you've got going, but however many years you can go back, so that we can see that impact by county.
Okay, I think we had a good review today. It's a good start. So what do we have to accomplish now? I'm gonna, before we move on, you wanna pick a date, or is that what you wanna do next to finalize this review?
So let me share my screen one more time. One moment, please. Okay, so next steps. If the board wants to discuss a schedule for a June workshop and kind of give the broad strokes of when you might be out of town or preferences for time, would absolutely love to talk about that, and then I can send out an email with some potential dates based on your feedback. And then I was thinking between now and the end of the month, I've been taking notes on the comments made during the meeting here, but if you have more comments or concerns you'd like to share, jot them down in an email or something and send those to me. Then I can kind of compile these and make sure we're prepared to address them when we get to the June workshop. So, and I'll just recap looking ahead, and we'll have, you know, the budget schedule identified, a workshop in July, and kind of optimistically hoping, you know, addressing comments, making changes by then, and then having a general consensus on the budget and levy. And then, oops, excuse me, trying to post that draft budget. It doesn't have to be the final, but you need to post for your public hearing. It has to be done well in advance of your actual public hearing date. So if we want to hold the budget public hearing on August 8th, we'd need the info to the papers by the 19th. And we just want to have that draft total budget, draft levy. And then have that hearing, and if someone comes and shares some comments, or just if managers have last minute revisions they'd want to make, we want to try to get those up front as much as possible, but we could always push the budget adoption to August 22nd if needed, but really aiming for early August, just to make sure that we are well in advance, having everything buttoned up and ready to go to certify that levy before the 15th, and not be kind of down to the wire at the last minute. Oh, I guess right now discussion, if you want to discuss schedules, and if a May 31st deadline for written comments makes sense.
So do we want to pick a June workshop date? What do we want to do here?
Well.
Or can they do
First, I want to talk about this schedule for doing the preliminary hearing with the public, that first one. So early, that's, you know, that's a month and a half before the deadline, and I think we should be shooting for more of the middle of August or that second, that third week in August, that third full week. So that we can, if we have issues, that we can work them out during that time. And then have, that really be the final for us, the final date for us. With just, really important last minute tweaks, but no changes. That makes more sense to me than having it so early in August. And if we get done sooner than that, if it goes by swimmingly so that we don't have any issues we're still talking about in July that need resolution in early August, we've got that time.
Did we do July 19th last year? Was that, or we're later than that?
Last year, we were on a bit later schedule, and you might recall the board scheduled a special meeting in early September to wrap up some final comments on the budget. And so, yeah, it was getting just a little bit to that deadline last year.
Well, looking at my calendar, if we're gonna do one a month, is that what we're planning?
That's what your intent was, right, Emily? One in June.
This was
one
all in that budget schedule that the board approved last meeting.
Yeah,
So how about June 11th? It's a Tuesday. Or Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of that week.
The 11th is the delisting event at.
Oh, yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, let's not do it that day. The next week, I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday pretty open. Easily rescheduled events, personal events, so how does that work?
Yeah,
Are you guys hearing this on the phone,
we have
on Zoom?
a board meeting on the 20th.
Yeah,
Let's see. No, that's not right. That's 7.
can we just do maybe send out a bunch of dates and that for,
yeah, let's use that, electronic, I like
yeah,
that.
because then you know all the stuff that's on your calendars, and then we can just respond as best we can. It's far enough out that we probably should have some open hours. And the time we take for that, Emily, is 2-hour meeting, or what do we normally do?
Normally 2 hours. I know studies have shown that longer, people kind of start to get burned out and productivity goes down a little bit, but if you want to schedule a longer time, we can absolutely do that.
So why don't we try to set one up in June, and as soon as we get the June one set up, try to get the July one set up. Then out another, so we don't have to do 2 in a row, we can just get one done, and then have 4 or 5 weeks ahead to get another one set up. And I think it's really key that we actually get our responses in even before May 31st. I mean, that's a long time from here, so.
Well, the only
Our
thing is,
responses? What do you mean?
I mean, concerns that you have on the
Concerns.
budget.
Okay,
there is an advantage because of the events, well, having that event on the 11th, board meeting on the 13th, and then we're going into, the summer tour and potential vacation things. If we could get it in the first week of June, if that works, I think we'll have fewer conflicts in terms of actual district activities.
Okay.
So maybe that would be a target. And
Why don't you
then
target that first week with some deco and then go from there?
almost 4 weeks out. Managers can look at that.
I would suggest that we make it for 2.5 or 3 hours so that we don't have to have as many meetings. We can get more done, with an extra half hour or hour. We schedule it for 3 hours and then we're done at, 2.5, that's fine. But I just don't want to keep hitting this all summer long. Let's spend a little bit of extra time.
How does the board feel? Would you rather just meet 2 hours or try to go to 3? I think we gotta
Is it
start,
small?
start with the budget. I don't see any real big long-term issues here. I mean,
You never
macro
know,
issues.
I'm saying, just
Yeah.
block it out, and if we need it, we need it, we don't, we don't.
So feedback 2 or 3 hours. Dave Baki?
I was just gonna say, if we go 3 hours, we need to have a break in there.
Mhm.
Right. No, I agree.
Otherwise, 2 hours, we need to be efficient.
Mhm.
Chris?
3 hours are tough for me, just trying to find
I
a block
thought-
of time, but
Manager Taves?
Yeah, 2 hours is kind of maxing out my attention span too.
Okay. Well, let's try 2 hours and see what happens on the first meeting. If we're all well prepared and Emily answers a lot of the questions, we won't have to go through them, so.
Try to turn around the info that you guys asked for tonight. We'll get that posted in advance, so that you can look at that. And then we also
Okay.
have on our radar, the floodplain vulnerability workshop number 2. We just had workshop number 1 last week on the 2nd. Me and Camilla are following up with those revised maps and everything. And then we were also looking at early June for that. So I'll send out a scheduling poll for early June, and maybe we can just kind of see how people are feeling about scheduling those things and if you want to prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah, the floodplain vulnerability, we're coming back and reviewing something that's been modified slightly, so that shouldn't be a real long meeting, should it? An hour probably, an hour, 15 minutes?
I would think that's probably fairly accurate, you know, so I
Okay.
mean, if the
But we're not carving out new areas, you know, is the next step, so we're just trying to solidify what we looked at last time. So.
I think we want to split them up, so we,
Yeah.
I don't think we want to do them both in the same meeting. I think we want to dedicate separate times. So,
Okay, so, Emily, you'll send that out then, and we'll move on to the next topic then? Nobody else have any comments?
That sounds good.
Um,
And maybe just a quick note, if, I wasn't sure if the board was wanting to look at this upcoming May 23rd board meeting date. Do you recall that there was some talk of not everyone could make it to that one?
Well, we're talking about maybe moving it one day, one way or the other. We'll discuss that. I've got another discussion here when we get down to the, after, at next board meeting. We'll discuss it at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to project update then.
President managers, this is Blaine's summary of different slides, and I don't know if there's, I'm trying to go through them. We continue to work on closing out the 2 main projects that we did over the winter. This was the JD6 tributary.
You don't have any on the screen.
Yeah.
I don't have those embedded into this presentation.
Oh, okay. So, let's see, can
Here, let me see.
I can,
People probably can look at those by themselves.
yeah,
These are just updates on the project that we've known.
right, all the managers
There's
able
nothing
to
new.
look at themselves, right, there's,
Mhm.
you know, like I said, we're working on closing out the vegetation components of these projects. And I already, spoke a little bit about on the Little Comfort, sub watershed enhancement project there that, the landowner reached out to us today, so we're, affirming, their interest in proceeding. So, I'm sure we'll have more updates coming up on that, so.
Okay, so we'll move ahead then.
So,
I did have one question I sent to you. I don't need an answer right now about JD6 and the deep pool, the legal concern that I have, all that. So somebody needs to get back to me on that. So
right, and.
you
well,
don't have to
I-
answer it now. That's fine.
Okay,
That's the same concern we have on 61 project, Highway 61 project. 'cause
Except there's
there's a-
not deep pools there though. I don't
Yeah,
think.
there is,
Is there?
sure. there's holding ponds, and those are the small ones.
Yeah.
One by 61 and one up a little bit further.
I think we could take 2 minutes with council here,
Okay, fine.
so.
I just don't wanna
Right,
be on TV and have to.
right, so,
Somebody almost drowned.
That's what I was concerned about.
right,
They
well,
told me, don't bother.
I
don't
saw
worry, don't
Fran
worry.
Muron was
They're
on
not
TV
going to jail, we are.
over a stoplight, and so.
right, well, we had a similar discussion for the other managers on Third Lake Pond. That project was excavated and it's quite deep and there's people living right next door.
Right.
With no fence
Mhm.
and fundamentally,
I didn't really remember discussing those things. actually.
we did,
Okay.
so Mr. Holtman, just for your reference. President Schmaltz was asking about the risk potentially involved with respect to the JD6 project and the pools that were created by the district across the road. Well, across and down the road a little bit from Tim's Marina, but never mind that they would have risk of getting hit by a car trying to get across the road, but, or anyone else. So we have multiple projects around the district where there is always some potential risk of somebody entering into particularly a child or someone. The worst case would be drowning. But given the general makeup of the district and the activity, that is private property. The other one, and Highway 61 is actually district owned property, so you could maybe argue that would have a little bit more risk potentially, but same with the Third Lake Pond, the board discussed fencing it entirely. That was a pretty, would have been quite an extensive cost. There was a lot of opposition to the suggestion. And it was more importantly, that was city property and they opposed having a fence because their policy is no fences around any of our stormwater ponds, because if you have a fence and you get over it, then you're assuming some liability potentially of moving to, so your council, if I'm summarizing my memory of what that activity, if that's correct. Otherwise, maybe we can just address that, because we do have these current projects.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure we've thought about it, and if we've come to a conclusion and we're satisfied with the legal aspect and risk aspect, that's fine with me. So,
Yeah, well, it's not that area, it's others too.
yeah,
So
right.
we've got to make sure we're doing it equitably throughout all of our projects. If there's an issue.
Right, and
Mhm.
Okay, so we have summary of board direction then.
I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
And this is on the JD6 Western Tributary. Is the old ditch flow path, is that now closed down? If that's still running too? Or is it capturing all of the water in and treating it and holding it?
so this is the western tributary, not unlike the Highway 61 project. So we take the low flow piece, there's a weir structure. And the design is that during the initial phase of flow, and I'm sure Dr. Wilkinson could probably speak to this in more detail, but would have the highest concentration of nutrients. So, and then there's an overflow or high flow bypass, as they call it, that says basically, once the water gets to this height, the dirtier water, if you will,
Is
is
trapped.
entered into the system and is being treated. And now you're just talking about large volumes of cleaner water on a relative basis that goes through. So the
The
system,
old patch.
right,
the
so
old-
the whole thing is still there. It will remain, but it's basically, we're kicking it over into the wetland to reestablish the wetland functionality and provide some level of treatment.
Good.
Okay. All right, good. So moving on then, summary and approval of board direction. Anything, council?
Mr. Chair, I have several comments made to Ms. Heinz as she further develops the budget materials, which I can note if you wish, but otherwise I don't have anything.
I'm just taking notes.
Thank you. All right, moving on then, the next board meeting is May 23rd, and Manager Anderson will not be able to attend that meeting, and we were wondering if there's an opportunity to move it up. We pay for the checks at that meeting, so we really have to get those checks approved within those 3 days or so. What, do you have dates available then, manager?
Yeah, Monday through Wednesday
Of that week?
of that week would be fine.
So what does that do to us, Mike, from a process standpoint?
I'm just trying to quickly look to see what we have on the draft agenda. I don't know if, Emily or.
And the other question, would the other managers be available then or not?
Well. The other question maybe, I might ask Emily is, do we think that we could turn around the flood resiliency piece and incorporate that into, because this would be a special meeting. It won't be a regular meeting anymore if you move the date. So we won't be able to add, because the regular meeting was advertised at the beginning of the year, so this would not, we're not comprised. This would now be a special meeting we're talking about.
Is that true, Chuck? It has to be called a public meeting and not just a
special meeting.
change, or special meeting, I mean, instead of a change to the regular meeting?
Mr. Chair, Manager Anderson, the district would have to notice the meeting in the same manner as a special meeting, but it would still be a regular meeting, so you could, I believe, adjust the agenda.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So there are some items and we could, potentially still keep that date and, it depends on how you want to handle it. If you want to do, well, let's see if everybody's available first, I guess, but. Emily, would earlier in the week be too soon, do you think, for Camilla to get those maps and things wrapped up?
So, I did not plan to bring the floodplain, any of the floodplain things to the May 23rd meeting, because my takeaway was that we would schedule another workshop, a special meeting in early June to review those materials.
Would it be easier just to take, and do a quick survey on those 3 dates and see if anybody's available those evenings?
Well, I was also just wondering, I mean, we have the date scheduled, if there's things there that are less.
Urgent?
Well, consequential that, potentially Manager Anderson wanted to participate in, we could just keep as such, but trying not to make it complicated, but also not have back-to-back meetings to.
Well, the other way we can do this, I think maybe what we should do is, just as a board, decide whether, because if Manager Anderson misses this one and I miss another one, and I want to move a meeting, we'll be moving meetings every month, so. Maybe what we should do as a board, decide whether we want to get into this kind of a situation, or whether we should just do the best we can, and if you can't attend Zoom wise, then you're gonna have to miss a meeting, so. Cause it looks like we're gonna be changing this.
Well, the other is that the week after Memorial Day weekend, there's, 28th, 29th, 30th, that would be another week in between. We have 3 weeks in between 2 regular board meetings. So you could do some combination, as well. That's available.
I'm not available the 30th.
Yeah, I have my calendar that I forgot to bring it with me, so I just have it with me.
Okay, we'll just work on sending something out, I guess. Fundamentally, the only thing, so right now we have,
It's pretty easy, it's gonna be in the evening, right? So it's either you can come or you can, and if one person can't come, then we've got the same issue we've got with Manager Anderson, so. And that's why it's important to stick to our schedule, I think, if we think about it down the road. And if something really, really critical, we could try to move that topic to a week later or something. like
well,
that.
there's 2 things that I know Manager Anderson would be interested in. One is that the crisis communication plan, the other is a public relations research update. So those 2 pieces are tentatively
Pretty important, right?
coming back to the board, so.
At the 23rd.
Correct. So we could either move those and.
Well, see if we can move the meeting up or move it back to the 28th, if that's what you
Or
want to do.
sometime.
Yeah.
All right, we'll work on that. We'll communicate with the other board members and see what we can come up with. Otherwise, we would have a permit And I guess that the only thing is what we've communicated to the permittee right now. We have a permit 24007 coming to the board. The Heath Avenue Iron and Hand Sand Filter feasibility study from EOR. The administrative pieces on the summer tour, and then our liability coverage waiver that the district
Okay,
generally does. So not a lot administratively, but
okay.
we'd probably get like an hour meeting or something.
Chris, I just want to remind you, could you stay on for a few minutes afterwards?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Can, at the last, or the next meeting, can we have on the agenda, the permit? I believe it was a permit that was issued to Chisago County for some storage ponds along Highway 8. Stormwater ponds? No, maybe that was preliminary. Maybe that was a preliminary report, okay,
Yeah, we have not issued them.
Okay, good.
They have not applied for. permit.
all right, good.
Okay, any other comments before we adjourn? So the next meeting will be determined by the survey here, otherwise it'll be on the 23rd as scheduled. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
I,
thank you, Manager Taves. Troy, could you please do a roll call vote?
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
I.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so motion adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And
Night.
Chris, if you would stay here for a few minutes so we can just chat on something about Forest Lake.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hey.
Mike, can I make you a host and then I'll sign off and then?
Sure, yeah. Okay.
We'll just be talking. We're not gonna have any show.
Oh, you're already a co-host, so I'm going to leave the meeting.
Recording can be stopped too, I think.
Oh, yeah, stop the recording.